Ladies and gentlemen, welcome. This is the second episode of the My Path series on this channel. Please remember, if you're just interested in the market structure and forex trading, you don't need to watch it. It's just for the ones who are interested in my personal path. Okay, so last time we talked about my upbringing in Germany, my high school times, my graduation in 2004. Oh my god, how time flies. Jesus. Yeah, and I told you how everything was flowing. I always worked hard, I always worked a lot. I did a lot of things at the same time. But yeah, things were flowing, everything was good. So yeah, after graduation, it was time to decide where I should study. And at that time, I had a friend who was already studying in Oxford. So my parents and me, we took a flight down there and, well, up there rather. And he showed us the place, the university, the city. And yeah, overall I liked it, it looked good. He was doing the PPE program, I think, which is politics, philosophy, economics. I'm sure it still exists. But yeah, I mean, overall it made a bit of an old-fashioned impression, let me say. So the other thing is, if I wanted to study there, I had to wait another 7 months or so. So I looked for alternatives and I checked the rankings and all that, and I found Maastricht University, which at that time was going strong in the rankings, had a lot of publicity. And we also went there to the Netherlands to check out Maastricht University. And yeah, I was impressed. Everything looked very modern. They had a very modern library, computers. They also introduced this problem-based learning system called PBL, which was based on a Harvard learning system. I will come to that in a second. And yeah, I looked at both alternatives and I came to the conclusion that Maastricht would be the better choice, because the program was completely in English. It was only 1.5 hours away from my home, so at some weekends I could go back to Germany as well. In terms of value for money, at that time it was very good, because you almost had no tuition fees in Maastricht. Unfortunately they changed that. Yeah, and since I came to the conclusion to study economics based on my good experiences with that teacher at high school, and based on the idea that I wanted to work in development economics, okay? That's something I should explain. So at that time, it's not that I wanted to become a trader. My idea was basically to get into development economics, to help countries, you know, prosper, to fight poverty and all these things. And I should also explain that I had participated before at several Model United Nations. These are simulations of the UN debates, and I liked it a lot. Already during high school I did a German one called Spoon. I was elected Secretary General there as well. And then later on I went to the US and participated in a international version of that in New York City. Was really good to, you know, gain some skills in talking English, debating, negotiating, etc. And yeah, this also had an influence on me wanting to specialize in that direction of development economics. I also considered for a while to study in Germany, because obviously with my grades I could pretty much pick any university. But I came to the conclusion that it's better to do a program which is completely in English, also to do a Bachelor of Science. And at that time many universities in Germany, they didn't have the Bachelor yet. They still had the old system. So anyways, so I enrolled in the International Economics Bachelor of Science program in Maastricht. And pretty soon I was suddenly living in the Netherlands, and yeah, that's where the first challenges started for me, you know. And obviously we all have our challenges, but so let me explain. On the one hand, the simple things. I mean, I was not used to live on my own, to take care of everything, to be honest, you know, like to have your own flat, to do your own admin, to cook, to take complete control of your life. That was the first lesson I had to learn. But then on top of that, the program was very, very demanding and very difficult. So let me explain. There was like a 7-week structure. So every 7 weeks you would have exams in 2 subjects or more. And so here's the philosophy of the PBL system. You're not in the school to acquire the knowledge. Rather, you have to acquire the knowledge yourself. There's a precise guide of which chapters of which books you have to read, which exercises you have to do. And then after the 7 weeks, there is the exam. Now, first of all, before the exams, during the tutorials, you're supposed to present the knowledge you acquired on your own. Okay, so it's self-studying. Then maybe you do a presentation or an exercise or something like that in the classroom, which and then there were also lectures. So the lectures were for like a few hundred people. The classrooms were normally between 15 and 25 people. So you may think quite personal, but not really, because as I said, there was a complete structure. Everything was fixed, and the workload was quite immense, to be honest. You had to directly start studying, read a lot. If you fall behind, if you need more time to understand things, you could quickly run into trouble. And the other thing is, at that point, there was a system where when you didn't have the minimum points required, you would basically get kicked out of the university. And the rate of people getting kicked out was pretty high. I think it removed around 30-35%. So basically 1/3 of people you saw at the beginning wouldn't be there after a while, because they simply wouldn't have enough credits to continue the program. So that was very, very harsh. I'm not sure whether they still do it. And let me tell you, during the time I was there, overall, I think at least 3 students died, and 2 of those students committed suicide. And I'm sure that the program was a factor in that. I mean, I can't prove it, and I didn't know the people very well, but I wouldn't be surprised, because there was massive pressure on students. It wasn't easy. So that was the one thing, the structure of the whole program. It was very demanding. The other thing is, when I went to study economics, I had all these ideas, these expectations. I thought, we're going to sit down, we're going to really learn and understand, how economies work, how economic growth can be established, how development countries can improve, how international trade works, and so on. I had all these expectations also based on my high school courses. But I was faced with the reality that the course was around 80% mathematics, which, okay, it is a quantitative study, of course, but my expectations, in terms of the science itself, were not really met. I had a different idea, and I had to realize that when you study economics at the university, it's mostly quantitative. Of course, there are also other courses and so on, but it's very, very quantitative. So basically, you solve a lot of equations. Okay, you work on mathematical models and all that, and the actual science. I mean, it also has a place, but it's way, way less intuitive or qualitative as you would think. So basically, what happened next is, so after I was used to, everything, going well, I was struggling in the first year. It was all too much for me, to live on my own, to take care of everything, and then to have this massive workload. I needed my time to understand things. I wanted to properly read chapters, but there was not really room for that. You had to basically get knowledge in your head, okay, then you had to be able to, give output accordingly, to solve exercises, equations, etc. Okay, so basically that is what this was about. Okay, and there are other deeper issues, and I should make a separate video about this only, because economics as a subject, where do I start? I mean, I recommend to study Nassim Taleb. He has done great work on explaining what the problem is. Some people may say, look, it's just a young field, it's where medicine was 500 years ago. Fair enough. Other people would say that there are really deep-rooted issues. It's not really a science. Models are very far away from reality, and I definitely believe that. I mean, there's a massive gap between reality and between the economic theory and economic models. There is a big problem with methods which are taught and used. Okay, as you know, I'm a big fan of fractal models, but those fractal models which were created by Benoit Mandelbrot, they never were accepted in mainstream economics. Okay, it was always like a branch outside of the mainstream. Okay, and of course, in every academic field, we have the problem that there is politics going on. Okay, there are competing schools of thought, they're competing professors, they're competing faculties, and all that. That's another issue with science in general. But in economics, you can really feel it. I mean, think about it. How many economists are there who have done good predictions over the last decade? Okay, or let's set the bar lower. How many economists do you know who have really added value and given great explanations and analysis over the last 10 years? I mean, it's difficult to find anyone who doesn't come from a political corner or has some other agenda. It's very problematic, and I would like to make a separate video with some PowerPoint slides about that. And later on in my life, when I'm older, I also want to work on the field and maybe pull it in a right direction. So when you study economics today, well, I mean, now we live in a different time as well. But of course, they will also teach you the theories of Adam Smith and Keynes and Milton Friedman. But overall, you have to understand that it's not so intuitive. Okay, it's not that you spend a lot of time on those old books they wrote. Okay, it's more like you are concentrating on mathematical models, trying to place different variables in relation to each other. Okay, for example, with the DAD SAS model. Okay, so they try to plot different factors against each other. That's inflation, economic output, exchange rates, and then they change factors, they move lines around, and they try to explain how this would affect variables. The problem is with all that, first of all, reality is different. Reality is not a linear model, and if you make the model a bit non-linear, that doesn't solve the problem either. Okay, but anyways, let's not get too far off topic here. So I was struggling, the workload seemed way too much, and I was always a hard worker. I sit down and I try to work, but I struggled at the beginning. I didn't get great grades like before. I was really stressed out. I still remember at some point when I talked to my parents, they were like, "Look, don't worry, change to something else. You can do something else." But in that moment I said, no, that's not how I work. I will not change to something else or give up. So one of those moments where you feel a bit like emancipated. You feel like you become an adult and you take things in your own hands, and that's what I did. So I studied hard. I went crazy. I was the first one in the library in the morning, the last one who leaves. I spent all day in the library, almost every single day. I studied hard. My room was full of papers and formulas. My parents always laughed about this. So basically, on my wall there were like loads of papers with formulas, so I could remember them. And I went hard, and it was not a very easy time. But thanks God, then things turned for the better, and bit by bit I got things under control. I got used to managing my life, let's say. I got used to doing the workload required. I found better techniques to study. I found ways which worked for me, and then slowly but surely things improved until I again was able to get good grades, and then I excelled from there. So this whole process was very, look, overall the school is good, because if you have studied there, you will always be someone who takes initiative. You take things in your own hand. You don't expect anyone to give you the knowledge you need. You get the knowledge yourself. Yeah. And later on, when I studied in the US, when I also was at Harvard for some time and so on, it was not, I mean, it was equally difficult, I would say. Maybe even Maastricht was a bit more difficult at that time. But you know, in the US, there's a different philosophy of studying at the university. There's more personal connections with the professors and so on. But we come to that later. So what happened then is, yeah, I also took, and I always did it, and I recommend it, I took additional courses which were not part of my program, because I thought, if someone thinks this should be part of my program, maybe I disagree. Maybe I think this course should also be part of it. So sometimes I enrolled in other courses, sometimes even just to sit in to get the knowledge. That was a great idea. I recommend that to everyone. Always put the knowledge first. And that brings us to general points. I don't know why, but there are certain things in my life which tend to repeat again and again, like patterns. First of all, I always put content first. I care about the content. That's number one. Secondly, if there's an easy choice and a difficult choice, for some reason I always end up taking the difficult choice. Even if I try to consciously take the easy choice, somehow I always end up taking the difficult one. Thirdly, I'm always a bit of a rebel, I would say. I don't take everything at face value. I try to use my own brain. I try to look at counter arguments, and I think that's good. Then fourthly, I never give up. I may start being one of the worst, and I may end up being one of the best, and that's also very good. Never give up. If you're serious about something, if you're committed to something, go all the way. All right. What happened then is, and I will talk about this in another video, because I would like to keep those videos here a bit short. During the studies, I did several internships. So during the summer holidays normally, which were around 2 months, I think, you would normally use the time to do an internship. And I did it, I think, at a German consultancy, then later at some top tier investment banks in London. But then I also went to Africa, to Cameroon, Central Africa, to do some development work. And to make a long story short, it was an amazing experience. It was a great decision to do that. But I also have to tell you that at the end of that, and this first-hand experience, I mean, I was teaching there at the school. I was working at a charity called Linked Up, which was getting finances for like 300 school children for their books, etc. I came to the conclusion that, I do not want to specialize in development economics, because, and I have to elaborate on this in another video, I'd never ever wanted to be dependent on some kind of institution, because, to make a long story short, we were trying to get contributions from a UN organization in order to be able to finance more educational materials for students, and they just didn't want to do it. That was very frustrating. Also, I realized it's not that easy. It's not, you can't just say, Western countries are exploiting developing countries. That's something I always kind of believed, but it's more complicated than that. For example, when it comes to Africa, there are many internal issues which need to be solved at some point. But to make a long story short, I came to the conclusion that I wanted to get into capital markets and to basically do things myself, rather than depending on any institutions or being a full-time development worker and all that. So that's why later on I specialized in finance. So yeah, everything then went well. I went for 6 months to Spokane, Washington, to do a semester abroad at Whitworth University, which was a great time. And it was much easier compared to Maastricht, that's for sure. We had a fantastic time there. And at some point I graduated, and later on I did a master degree in finance in Nice, France, at EDHEC Business School. I went again to the US later on, to Boston, to study a bit, but all this is for other videos, and also the internships at the which I then did at Oppenheim in Frankfurt and Goldman Sachs in London and Bank of America Merrill Lynch in London. I talk about all this stuff, I think, in other videos. Otherwise this gets too long. But to summarize the whole thing, so yeah, the bachelor, it shaped my life. It gave me certain skills I will always possess and which I needed later on, like to be persistent, to acquire knowledge, to find ways of learning which work for you, to use your own brain, as I say, to not just assume that things which are shown to you are correct, but to question everything. And yeah, it was great to acquire several skills which I will definitely need later on. As I said, when it comes to the field of economics, there are severe problems with that field. Yeah, Nassim Taleb has explained how, value at risk methods are not incorporating black swan events such as financial crises. I definitely agree with that, and later on I became a rebel, especially my master degree, after I read the Black Swan. That's for another video, because, I saw firsthand while I was reading those books that, the methods which are taught at top schools have those kind of issues Nassim Taleb emphasized. Yeah, and I even personally believe that these days, with so many changes within the world, with the internet, with cryptocurrencies, with all kinds of things which fundamentally change the world, we need completely new models anyways. Economics needs to, catch up. It's too far behind. The models are way too simplistic, and the whole way this science works is questionable. The whole way research is conducted and what's accepted as a body of knowledge, it's all very, very questionable. Okay, so that's what you realize when you really study it in depth. At the beginning you think, oh, these guys, they completely know what's going on, they understand it, they can come up with reasonable policies. But then if you get into it, you realize that there are just different groups with different interests trying to push certain beliefs and certain agendas, and that this field needs a complete rework. Okay, definitely now 2021, economics needs to be renewed. I mean, it's about time, and this will happen. Who knows, maybe later when I'm older I may have a little contribution in that context. Who knows, let's see. And of course today I'm a professional trader, that it's even more apparent how big the gaps are between economic theory and reality. I mean, as you know, on this channel I've shown you all the market manipulation in the world's biggest financial markets, in the forex markets, and this is not incorporated by academics at all. They try to make you think that it's all supply and demand, which is complete BS. It's not supply and demand. That's not why euro-dollar goes up or down. It's all market manipulation. I've proven this. And actually at some point I should do a paper about this, an academic paper. Maybe I collaborate with someone. So if you are a young researcher who understands that, contact me. Maybe together we can make a paper and, also approach the subject a bit in academic terms. Why not, And apart from that, at some point I want to finish my book also on the market causality. But this will not happen this or next year. This will take some years, I think, because I'm still a full-time trader, of course, and this is where most of my time goes. Maastricht was a very, very important time for me. In the end, everything worked, and I have to explain, so I really again came to the flow where I was using my time efficiently in terms of, I was also then elected president of our investment club. So we were basically, everybody was investing a few £100, and then we would invest it in the stock market, and that was fantastic, just to start trading a bit. Because, the only exposure I had before was when my father gave me some telecom shares, I think, which he was told to buy at like €100, and which came down to below €10 and stayed there for years. That's also another topic. And yes, so I try to expose myself to the reality as well, by doing the investment club, by doing internships at very good companies, by doing my own research, by reading books about the field, which are not part of the program, by taking courses which may not be part of my specific program, which was like international economics. So that was really overall good, because I also was able to collect more practical skills, such as, you know, accounting, finance, a bit of legal, a bit of taxation, you know, a bit of financial modeling, a bit of IT, a little bit of programming, you know, all these things which are very, very helpful later on in your career, whatever you do. Yeah. So yeah, the institution itself, yeah, it was a great institution. It still is a great institution. Very difficult. Okay, you need to be completely committed. You need to find ways which work for you. Otherwise, you will quickly run into problems. It's definitely state of the art. But you really need to have all your things together. The field itself, economics, as I said, has lots of issues, and no matter where you study around the world, at the best schools, you will be confronted with those. Okay, and that again needs a whole separate video on its own. But fine, you know. And some of the things you learned can be useful, at least on a basic level, but that's pretty much it. Always, you know, use the time when you study and so on to have exposure by doing internships, okay, by doing a semester abroad, okay, that's very, very important. It's also what you make of it, okay. Then, of course, mindset wise, if you're committed to something, stick with it. There's always challenges, okay. I'm not a believer in running away from challenges. Rather face the challenge head on and do your best to, you know, master it, because as you know, later on, that was the only way to reverse engineer all the market manipulation. Exactly that, you know, to basically learn what's going on by observing, by experimenting with data and all the causality. Yeah, that's exactly what was needed later on, you see, so everything kind of makes sense. And what happened later is then, yeah, after graduation, I went to France to do the master degree. I talk about this in another video. And after that, I spent some years in London, and then at some point I joined a stockbroking and investment management firm, and then at some point I started my own companies. But all this is for other videos. Anyways, I hope you liked this one. All the best.